Good afternoon, everyone, to our Heritage Kitchener August meeting. Before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge and introduce our student planner with help, who's going to be helping Heritage Kitchener planners in the planning division, Rida Chowdhury. It's over there. Thank you. Great. So before we begin, I would like to know if anyone has pecuniary interest or something of general nature to proclaim. Anyone? Seeing none, we'll continue on to our discussion items. And our first item, 4.1, is a draft scoped heritage impact assessment, 1254 Union Street. And proposed on that site is a construction of a maintenance facility. I think some of you would recognize the property, that it was used most recently as the hacienda it was converted into a sugar beet factory, converted into housing, and open for special events as well. And it was very good to see. And I recall as a counselor, between 1997 and 2000, that the owners of that factory, although it wasn't being used, were just wondering how it could be repurposed. And so it's good to see that it came to fruition and it's being used, and it's quite a spectacular property. So I would like to have Diksha Chowdhury, our heritage planner, make a brief presentation. Thank you. Oh, and I must say, if you as a committee will hold your questions, we'll have the delegation speak and have questions from them and then go back to staff. Thank you, Diksha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Marilyn? Sorry. Okay, there we go. Awesome. So the first item on the agenda is the draft scope heritage impact assessment for 1254 Union Street. The property is currently listed as a non-designated property of cultural heritage value or interest on the city's municipal heritage register. The building has undergone many alterations, but the original portions of the property were built in 1902 in the industrial vernacular architectural style, with Spanish eclectic influences being added later on. This property was the home of the first sugar beet factory in Ontario. The proposed development includes the construction of a one-story maintenance facility on the property. A scoped heritage impact assessment was required as part of a site plan application for this property. The report has concluded that the property only meets 1 out of 9 criteria. As mentioned in the report, due to time constraints with processing planning applications due to Bill 109, the site plan has received conditional approval with certain heritage conditions, the approval of this HIA being one of them. At this time, staff are reviewing the HIA and are requesting the committee's feedback. The applicant's heritage consultants are present today and will be giving a brief presentation about the application. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. And I'd like the applicant, the planners for the applicant to come forward. We have Dan Curry and Rachel Niser from MHBC Planning. As you know, you have 5 minutes to present. Please lean into the mic, speak right into it, and then following your presentation, committee will have questions, may have questions for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rachel will take you through a brief presentation, and then we'll both hear if there are any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Niser. I'm a heritage planner with MHBC, and I'm here with Dan Curry from MHBC. MHBC was retained by Moser Landscape Group to undertake a scoped heritage impact assessment for the proposed development on the subject lands addressed as 1254 Union Street in the city of Kitchener. The The subject property includes buildings associated with the Ontario Sugar Company, later the Dominion Sugar Company, and is listed on the city's Heritage Register. The lands are also adjacent to the inventoried cultural heritage landscape of Union Street, Union Boulevard, as provided in the City of Kitchener Cultural Heritage Landscape Study. The proposed development on the subject lands includes the construction of a 650 square meter, two-story warehouse maintenance facility to the rear of the existing two-story building on the subject lands. The building will be situated on an area that is currently paved for surface parking. There are no alterations proposed to the existing buildings on the subject lands. The subject lands were purchased by the Ontario Sugar Company in the spring of 1902. The company was a major contributor to employment and development in Waterloo Region. In 1909, the Ontario Sugar Company was declared bankrupt and the operations on the subject lands were taken over by the Dominion Sugar Company. This company operated on the subject lands until 1923. As shown in the images on the screen, the two-story building on the property served as a warehouse that was ancillary to the main factory operations, and the single-story 1902 building to the southeast was used as a machine shop. These buildings have been outlined on the 1925 fire insurance plan, and the warehouse building has been circled on the postcard. As illustrated on the aerial images on the screen, the majority of the buildings, including the three-story main building, were removed between 1930 and 1945. In 1941, Brown Steel purchased the subject lands and utilized the warehouse. The images on the right side of the screen show the warehouse building before its more recent alterations. Starting in 2005, the buildings on the site were renovated by Ron Doyle to serve as a private residence inspired by the Road to Santiago de Compostela, a century-old walk in northern Spain. Shortly thereafter, the space was used as an event space under the prefix of Hacienda Saria, and the market gardens operated on the subject lands from 2011 to 2022. As demonstrated on the 2003 aerial image on the screen, all of the landscape features on the property are a result of the alterations by Ron Doyle. The development of an independent warehouse maintenance building on the property will not result in impacts to heritage resources on the subject lands as a result of there being no changes proposed for the existing building, the proposed building being located to the rear of the two-story building, and as a result of the area proposed for development being occupied by surface parking. Further, there are no anticipated impacts to occur to the adjacent inventoried cultural heritage landscape of Union Street, Union Boulevard as a result of the proposal. The subject lands do not contribute to the character-defining features of the Union Street, Union Boulevard cultural heritage landscape, and the construction of the new building on the subject lands will not impact the features of the cultural heritage landscape. As a result of the absence of impacts, alternative development approaches are not warranted. Provided normal construction practices are employed for the development of the proposed maintenance warehouse building, including protective construction fencing around the existing buildings, no mitigation or conservation measures will be required. A conservation plan and summary of applicable heritage conservation principles is not required for the proposed development given the absence of impact. Thank you for your time, and please let Dan or myself know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Questions from the committee? Yes, Peter.
Is this building at all visible from Union Street?
So,
The new building,
oh, the new building.
yeah, I expect.
Sorry? The addition, the maintenance shed building, is that, it looks from the plan that you will be able to see a portion of it from Union Street. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's, do you want me to answer?
So standing on Union Street, the property does have a bit of a hill, and that warehouse building is on a hill. The proposed building has been aligned with the existing building. You may be able to see the west elevation, but I think it would be very minimal what you would be able to see, and that's also with consideration for the vegetation along Union Street. The property is fairly screened.
Okay. I find it unusual that there are no other picture or illustrations of the building than just the building plan. I don't think I've seen, or I don't recall any other heritage impact assessments that have just included the footprint of the sort of proposed building and no other information, whether it's material or elevation or et cetera.
Through the chair, Section 4 of our report includes a description of all the buildings on the subject property, and it does include a description of landscape elements.
That's a written description? Is there elevations of the proposed building?
For the proposed building, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. We do have elevations that were submitted with the site plan application, but they were not included with the heritage impact assessment. The building is proposed to be clad with metal siding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any other questions? Well, I'm curious. I must have missed it in the report. What's the cladding of this new building? Was that in the report?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's described in the report, but to the previous question, the elevations
Yes.
and a diagram showing the elevations of the building were not included in the report. What it is a approximate two-story industrial maintenance warehouse building. It's got steel siding, it's a gable roof, and on the rear has three large vehicle entrance doors. It's very much a industrial or type building. It does not have any architectural detail. It is very straightforward machine storage building is the best way to describe it.
Sure. So it's a storage shed, and the building, I realize that this is a proposal for the shed. Is there a use for the present of industrial building? That is this an office, or what is it?
Yeah, the existing building, formerly known as the Hacienda, is now the offices for Mosier Landscape Group. They own the property now. They use it for primarily their offices. Some of the more open areas they use for other events, but that's what the purpose of the lands are. They are proposing to build this maintenance shed for the storage of their tractors and trucks and the other equipment that they use in their business.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other comments? Ilona?
So is the building that's being proposed similar to the other outbuildings on that property, or is it going to look very different from them?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's there are only 3 buildings on the site. 2 of them are, although the main Hacienda building has been altered on the outside. They are two of the original warehouse buildings associated with the sugar beet factory. So they're primarily brick buildings. This building is, you can see the footprint. It's somewhat larger than the two smaller outbuildings. It will be clad in a different material. It will not have the same materials as the hacienda, steel siding versus brick.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alona? Oh, yes, Councillor Michaud.
There you go. Okay, thanks. I just have a question. I'm looking at the diagram and I'm trying to, and it might say somewhere 8.37 meters to the rear. That's from the rear of the building, so it's that far from the rear. So, and you said it'll be stored with tractors and landscaping equipment. Will there be anything else around the outside of that building? I mean, it's their property, right? So it can turn into a potentially like a parking lot of trucks and stuff too, couldn't it?
Through you, Madam Chair, right now, the space where the building is going to be constructed is a parking lot. It's an asphalt parking lot. And there will still be some asphalt around and behind the new building. So I anticipate that there will continue to be outdoor storage and probably some vehicles on the outside of this building as well. I think the building is partially going to be used for storage, but also for maintenance. So it'll be their shop for repair and other things like that. So there will still be outdoor storage around the building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Any other questions? Yes, Peter.
I just wanted to make a comment that without the further information in the building other than just its location on the site plan, I feel that the HIA is incomplete, and that that we as a committee can't make a full assessment of it without having that information there. So I just think that it may be good, it may not be good, but we just don't have enough information here in order to make that assessment.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll now go back to our questions for staff. So Diksha has made the presentation, and are there questions for Diksha? Since we're not making any motion, we're just giving feedback. We're not feedback from our committee members. And I think staff has heard enough comments which have some concerns about the overall proposal. Granted, it is a storage shed. However, we don't want the storage shed to overpower the present heritage building. I also understand from Marilyn, thank you, that a letter has been circulated from the chair of the North Waterloo Region Branch, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, and it has more to do with the HIA. The ACO has concern that the architectural significance is not recognized in that HIA. I think we need to be cognizant of these things today because of the reason for designation, heritage designation. If you have one item of significance, it is not as qualified as if you have two or more. And I realize as chair I should not be making these statements, but having looked, but I will, having looked at the former architectural drawings and the postcards. I just can't imagine how anyone in the late 1800s would develop a factory looking as elaborate and eloquent as this one, although many other buildings that are industrial have been turned into apartments and so on. But I really do feel we need to take note of this letter that has come in from the North Waterloo Region branch of the ACO as far as our statement of significance. So I'll leave that with you. Are there any other comments? I know each of you are circulated with this letter. Are there any other comments on the letter? Yes, Alona?
So I actually drove by that property today, and it is an amazing building. It's not like any other factory that I've seen in this area. So I think that there are probably aspects of it that are worthy of designation, of giving it more than 1 point towards being eligible for designation. So I think that we should take that into consideration.
Any other comments, corrections to staff? Thank you, then. Seeing none, we'll proceed to our next item, which is 4.2. Thank you. I think staff heard me, even though my mic was not on. All right. There are no more comments on this one, no more recommendation feedback. So we'll now continue on to item 4.2, which is the notice of intention to designate 64 Water Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-317. Here we have a remarkable religious institution that has been, I believe, here since 1899. It is just a very amazing structure, and it is very good to have the applicants interested in having this property designated. So without further ado, Diksha, would you please provide a presentation, and members hold your questions till after our delegation have spoken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So next we have a notice of intention to designate 64 Water Street North under Part 4 of the OHA. This property is the home of the First Church of Christ Scientist and was built in 1899 to 1900 at a time when Kitchener was still Berlin. Currently, the building is listed as a non-designated property of cultural heritage value or interest on the city's municipal heritage register. I do want to note that this is an owner-initiated designation, and we were contacted by them to consider designating this building. Staff were able to do a site visit and an evaluation in late May this year, and based on that evaluation, staff have concluded that this building meets 8 out of the 9 criteria for designation, making this a significant cultural heritage resource for Kitchener. The statement of significance has been attached along with the report for this item, but I'm just going to provide a brief summary of the building's cultural heritage value. So, starting with the design physical value, it is important because of its architectural style and mainly for 2 reasons. Firstly, this building is a blend of different architectural styles, which include the arts and crafts, Tudor Revival style, American Craftsman style, the Old English and shingle style, which is rare and unique in the context of Kitchener. Secondly, because this church was not built in the Gothic style, which was the norm at the time, that makes this building even more different and rare in the context of its use. The building sits on a triangular plot of land at the intersection of Francis Street North and Water Street North, with the 2 principal facades facing each of the streets, is 2.5 stories in height with a low but complex cedar roof. The foundation is high and made with rough rubble stone, again a unique feature since foundations this high are generally not found or made. The building is in excellent condition with almost all of its exterior original elements intact. The cladding of this building is also original. The door and door openings are original, window and window openings are all still original. And the prominent rounded tower with Tudor detailing is reflected of the Old English style of architecture. So this is the rear facade of the building, and as you can see, it's also rich in architectural details with a flat-topped, five-sided turret and a balcony next to it, and another circular tower, semicircular windows, and facades that include Tudor detailing. The inside of the church is also all original, except for the two wooden support beams located towards the front of the hall, which were installed to support the roof. The pipe organ, which can be seen in this picture, is from 1911 and came from Quebec. In front of the pipe organ, where the readers of the church sit, that forms part of the way they do their worship. So the pipe organ and all of the woodwork and wainscoting has been maintained very well and is in excellent condition even in the interior of the church. The building also includes a date stone 1899, which was laid on October 12, 1899, was quarried in Concord, New Hampshire, the home of Mary Baker Eddy, who was the founder of the Christian Science Society. So that was a brief snapshot of the architectural value of the building, but also significant is the historical and associative value. The faith was established by Mary Baker Eddy in the late 19th century, who was from New England. It follows a set of belief and practices that were formalized by Eddy, who through her own personal experiences believed in an alternative method of Christian healing. The first ever church of this faith, also known as the Mother Church, was built in Boston, Massachusetts, which can be seen in front of you. It was also built on a triangular plot of land. The church in Kitchener was the first to be built outside of the United States, in what was then known as the British Empire. The faith was brought to Kitchener, then Berlin, by Sarah and Samuel Williams, a prominent business family in the society at the time, who moved here after the birth of their first child. Meetings of the Christian Science Society were first held in Berlin in 1892, and for the next 18 months, Sarah Williams held Bible lessons in her home. From there, the congregation grew pretty fast, and it was only within 6 years that the land could be donated for the church. Sarah Williams also played an instrumental role in appearing before the Berlin Council to request the land that should be donated, and it was, which showed the fast-growing popularity and interest in this faith at the time. She also hired the architect Joseph Taft to design the church. He was one of the most successful architects in the US at the time, and through the design of the building actually brought the shingle style of architecture to Kitchener. He's known for designing many Manhattan brownstone terraces, many of which have been protected, and also labs for Thomas Edison. The church is also important for its contextual value. It is situated on a triangular plot of land at the corner of an intersection, similar to the placement of the Mother Church in Boston, which is also why this plot of land was purposely chosen. The placement and the style of the building can also be compared to the flat iron design that was popular at the turn of the 20th century in big cities like Toronto, Boston, and New York. Due to its prominent but unique design and its placement within the street, this building is also a landmark within the community. It is staff's opinion that this is a significant cultural heritage resource and has been immaculately preserved since it was constructed. The owners of the building, Donald Roberts and Colin Roberts, are actually here with us today, and they will be able to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. Great presentation. The pictures are spectacular. Thank you. I would like to invite Donald Roberts and Colin Roberts to come forward. I understand that Donald will be making brief remarks. And as I mentioned, please lean into the mic so we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'd like to begin with just a general apology. My hearing is not as good as it should be. The acoustics here, if I say, and if I say anything stupid or not following, I'm blaming it on my hearing. Okay, sorry. Really, there's, oh, there. Oh, thank you. Very quickly at the beginning, a minor correction. On page 105 of the document, support document, supporting pillars in the interior, that they're timber, I suggest that that's not accurate. In the 1950s, the building inspector saw some potential weight pressures from the roof, and they inserted 4 vertical steel pillars in the 4 corners. The 2 that are visible in the sanctuary are 4-inch steel posts, but they are covered, wooden covering on them as well. So the support for the church roof is much greater than this would indicate in the past there as well. And one little item about the base part that I noticed showing some people around, all the openings are keystoned. The work, the construction in this building is very impressive. Every opening door or window is supported by the surrounding stone. There's no steel to do the usual support there as well. So it's got a lot of special features. But really, the main thing I want to do right now is gratitude. And the list is, unless it's long, but I'm not going to do all of them. Carl Kessler, who was known for his work with Doors Open, kept pestering us to display, and we did. And with every one of those adventures, we've had a lot of people. There's a lot of interest in the community in the building. He also led us to Susan Burke, who has done wonderful work, write-ups in the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. And again, we appreciate her help as well. Susan Saunders Maver in the Waterloo Historical Society, Volume 107, 2019, did a very comprehensive study of the opening of the church, the people involved, the other things as well. Rich Mills has been very steadily supporting the church and the church founders, the Williams family in the community, so he's been very helpful there as well. The planning department, especially Deepsha and Jessica, who came to the site, were very thorough, very careful, and I think a little bit enthusiastic as well. The planning, the Heritage Kitchener is at the height of my list here, because the work you're doing right now is so important, and it's hard to imagine not having our historical roots protected as you are doing here as well. So thank you very much, and please continue as best you can under the very oppressive circumstances we have right now. That's much appreciated. And finally, an invitation. Whether we are granted or not, please feel free to come in any Sunday morning at 11 a.m. You'd be most welcome, and then you can see for yourself what a jewel we have there as well. I would take questions in.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Your remarks are gratefully appreciated. I wondered if you had any comments or observations about areas in the report with respect to the readers' chairs or the passageway or the small studies.
So do you have any comments about what's in the report about the readers' chairs?
Oh. Yes, Susan was interested in that. We are totally a voluntary organization. We do not have clergy. We elect people to read. Mary Baker Eddy was mentioned as the founder. We feel she discovered something, and she shares her discovery in a book called Science and Health. So our services are heavily Bible-based. One reader does the Bible, and then the second reader, or sorry, at the reverse, the first reader reads the Science and Health. Yeah, second reader reads the Bible. But our church service consists of that, readings from the scriptures and readings from Mary Baker Eddy, and we are elected from the membership. So that's why there are the two chairs and the two, I guess you'd call them dressing rooms downstairs as well. Susan Burke saw a lot of significance in that. It works for us. I'm not quite sure anything further than that.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Roberts from our members? Natalie?
So with a building of this age, obviously there's going to have to be restorations, anything like that in the future. Is there any noted need for adjustments or changes within the building itself at this current moment, or is it just as is?
Do we need to modify anything, or can continue as is?
No, we have all of our services in the church are inspected, approved. We have a chairlift that's looked at regularly. Our fire systems are checked regularly. There's the usual painting and things, ongoing expenses, but really, the building is quite sturdy. We do have, now that you mention it, the campers on especially the Francis Street door. That's quite a campsite for the homeless. And as a result, the doors, there's a lot of graffiti. So we would probably, at some point.
Thank you, Natalie. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I just really wanted to commend you for bringing this to us. It looks like such a beautiful site on the interior and the exterior, and you know, it could have just continued undesignated for many, many years, so thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Chapman. Councillor Chapman. Other
Gratitude
comments?
returned. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in and making presentation. And we'll just have a few more questions for staff and then continue on.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your good work.
Sure. All right, now we'll have questions for staff, for Diksha. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I was just wondering if in the lists that we've been going through, was this one highlight, or was it part of the review that we're doing?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes. This was a part of the prioritization list that we had compiled. So we were going to give this out to the committee at some point, but the owner came to us wanting to designate, so we sort of ran with that at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Other questions? Any? I just wanted to highlight the circulation again from Marg Rall, who's the chair, ACO North Waterloo Region Branch. And there were some items within the report that may not have been expressed as clearly as the ACO would wish, and it had to do with the offices, the separate offices in the lower level of the building, the ensuite bathrooms, the passageway, and also another concern expressed were the two areas for the readers. And I wonder, Diksha, this will be included in the statement of significance, will it?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, this will be included in the statement of significance.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting way of presentation, and I'm sure, all I know, there are no other religious institutions within the city, probably the region, that are laid out like this, never mind the religious institution. There also is another article, and Mr. Roberts had mentioned many of the people in the historical community who have done work on this church, namely Carl Kessler, who did Doors Open, Susan Burke, then Susan Maver, and also the Architectural Conservancy North Waterloo Region branch has a newsletter, and this was in the February 2016, about First Church of the Christ Scientist, and there's an article in that one. Are there any other comments, questions? Great. With that, I would like to propose the recommendation in the staff report, and which is in the form of a motion. It was resolved that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 64 Water Street North as being of cultural heritage value or interest. And I would need a mover for that. Councillor Chapman, thank you. Remind me, do we need a seconder? Okay. So I'll take the vote. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. So, correct me, we are looking to have this go to council August 28th. Thank you. And again, thank you so much for bringing this forward and pushing it to the head of our agenda. Our next item is 4.3, Kitchener Municipal Heritage Register Review and the August update. We have some very interesting properties. There are 4 to be discussed, brought forward. 40 Chapel Hill Drive, 4-30 King Street East, 1 Queen Street North, 67 King Street East, and 66 Queen Street South. And Jessica, would you please proceed with the presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a continuation of the Municipal Heritage Register review work that staff and committee have been undertaking this past year. And as mentioned, today we have 4 properties being brought forward for more detailed review. The first is 40 Chapel Hill Drive, which is the site of the new Church of Carmel located within the Carindale neighborhood. Our assessment determined that the property meets 8 out of the 9 criteria for designation under Ontario Regulation 906, amended through Ontario Regulation 569-22. Sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just the front facade of the building as viewed from Chapel Hill. Next slide, please. So the building has design value as it's a representative example of the modern architectural style with Scandinavian influences, and it displays a high degree of artistic merit through the blend of materials used, the geometric elements which create a unique and irregular massing, as well as the symbolism that was incorporated into the design to represent the beliefs of the new church. It also has associative value, which lies in its original ownership, that being the new church, who are still the owners today, and as well as through its association with the Swedenborgians of Kitchener, which were a religious group that had been present in the region since approximately 1830, and of which several past prominent residents were members of. This church was constructed to be the heart of what was then the Carindale community. Next slide, please.
So the building has further associated value as it was designed by John Lingwood, who was a prolific local architect that greatly influenced the development of the city and its built environment during the mid-20th century. It has contextual value as it maintains the church-centered characteristic of the surrounding area, which is identified as a cultural heritage landscape per our 2015 CHL study. And further, it's located in situ and it continues its historical use as a place of worship and as a school. Further, given its distinctive appearance and its size in comparison to the surrounding residential buildings, this church can be classified as a local landmark as well.
So the next building that we have is 1 Queen Street North, located at the corner of King Street and Queen Street in the downtown core of Kitchener. The building was built in the Italianate style of architecture. It's more popularly known as the American Hotel, built by Louis Brydup in 1862. Next slide, please. And this is just a front facade of the building taken, I think, sometime in 2011. Next slide, please. So the building meets 5 out of the 9 criteria for designation, and this building has design, physical, historical, associative, and contextual value. The building is in good condition overall and still has most of its original Italian architectural characteristics, such as the brick voussoirs, the decorative bracket and cornices, windowsills, the flat roof and deep eaves. This building is also the oldest commercial building in Kitchener. It has historical value because of its owner and use. The building was built by Louis Brydup, former mayor of Kitchener and a prominent businessman. And this building has served as a hotel for at least 100 years. The building also has contextual value because of its location and on being on a prominent intersection within the downtown core of Kitchener. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
So the next property is 67 King Street East, and our review has determined that this property meets 5 of the 9 criteria for designation. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the property's east elevation from 2014 as viewed across the street and through Speaker's Corner, which is the adjacent property. I've just included this image as it provides a better view of the building itself. In its current condition today, there's some very large trees in front of the building, and there's also a large art installation located directly in front of the entrance. Next slide, please. So this building is a representative example of the international architectural style in a commercial building. It has associative value due to its original ownership, which was the Canada Permanent Trust Company, whose origins date back to 1855, and which was, at the time of this building's construction, the oldest trust company in Canada. Next slide, please. The building has further associative and historical value as it was designed by another one of Kitchener's prominent and well-known architects, Carl Ryder, who in the span of his career made significant contributions to the development of the modernist architectural style in Southwest Ontario and Waterloo region. He's designed a number of the buildings within the city and as such contributed to the development and character of Kitchener's built environment. Further, there is contextual value as the building is located in situ and it continues its original use as an office. It maintains the character of the surrounding area, and it's located within the downtown cultural heritage landscape, which historically was the focal point of early development in what was then Berlin.
And the last property we have for the municipal register review is 66 Queen Street South. This building is located at the corner of Charles Street West and Queen Street. And if you remember, we had reviewed the neighboring property at the June's meeting. So this building was built in the Renaissance Revival style in 1898 by George Randall and William Roos for their grocery store, William and Roos Wholesale Grocers, which at one point was a very popular store. The building currently is in good condition and retained most of its architecturally important elements, such as the decorative brickwork, two-story height, red and yellow brick construction, and brick voussoirs. Next slide, please. The building has undergone many alterations since it was first constructed, but it does retain its overall structure and most of the decorative elements on the front facade. Next slide, please. So this building meets 4 out of the 9 criteria for designation. It has physical design value, but it also has significant historical value. The original owners, George Randall and William Roos, were prominent businessmen in Berlin at the time this building was constructed. George Randall, in particular, is known for his contributions, serving as a director for the Waterloo Mutual Fire Insurance Company for 33 years. He also served as a village magistrate for Waterloo, and then when Waterloo officially became a town in 1876, George Randall eventually became its mayor in 1878. He was also on the committee that was charged with the responsibility for building the region's first poorhouse, eventually becoming known as the House of Industry and Refuge, the first of its kind in Ontario. If you remember, the city most recently designated the existing building on that property. Other than George Randall and William Roos, this building was also used by its neighboring owners, John Fennell and Carl Nicholas Weber, other prominent businessmen in Berlin at the time. Currently, it is being used by the Working Center. The building also has contextual value because of its location at a prominent intersection with the downtown core of Kitchener, and that because it still retains its original location. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So based on the evaluations that we have done for this round, staff are recommending that all of these properties meet criteria for designation, and that we should be pursuing designation for them. That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica and Diksha. And now I'll turn it over to committee members to ask questions. Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering why 40 Chapel Hill Drive, that property was not reviewed by the Heritage Committee, by Heritage Kitchener? Like it said, no, we're not, NA, all the way down. I think the others were done by members of the committee, but not that one.
So through you, Madam Chair, if you reference the work plan that we had brought forward to committee in February, staff are undertaking some evaluations of properties themselves. So we have our own list, and then we've come to the committee to help cover the other 200 odd properties that we didn't think we'd be able to complete field evaluations for. So we're working off of both a staff list and then the properties that have been reviewed by you, the committee.
Sorry, in addition to that, the list that the staff are working on have been already reviewed by the designation subcommittee, so we're just furthering the work that has been done as part of those evaluations.
Thank you. If you know the church, without a doubt, it really should be pushed forward and promoted for designation. So. And the context of setting is remarkable. Are there other questions? Comments? I'd just like to add a little, I'm sorry, Councillor Michaud.
Right. I just want to commend staff on identifying these properties. I'm really particularly happy to see the King Street East one. Is that the one across from the current Krabby Joe's building, right? Was that the same architect or no? That did both? I can't remember what architect that was. Anyways, it doesn't matter. I'm just happy to see that you're kind of pulling them all together in that corner and you know, salvaging a good piece of history from the downtown core. So I really like that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. I'd just like to add comments about 66 Queen Street South. In 2006, the Mancinis, I would say, rescued this building, and they did a remarkable job of restoring the facade. And also, they did a lot of work on the attention to detail of the original woodwork. And for their work, the Waterloo Regional Heritage Foundation gave them the Award of Excellence, and that was 66 Queen South. And then, in 2018, the Ontario Architectural Conservancy has awards, and again, the building was awarded the A.K. Sculthorpe Award for Advocacy. And it was to the Working Center's leadership in retaining the heritage feel of historic buildings while renovating and repurposing them for public benefit. And I hear they have another spectacular building down on King, near the market. And all the scaffolding and coverings are coming off, so have a look. All right, back to staff and the recommendation. Any other questions, comments? I shall read it. It was resolved that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the cultural heritage value or interest be recognized and designation pursued for the following properties: 40 Chapel Hill Drive, 4-30 King Street East, 1 Queen Street North, 67 King Street East, and 66 Queen Street South. Who would like to move that? Thank you, Helena. All right, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Just clarify, staff, you're now going to propose for designation, but inform the owner? Is that the owners?
Yes, Madam Chair, the next step in the process would be to contact homeowners and work with them.
Right, thank you. So if the owners agree, do you have any idea when it may come to council?
Through you, Madam Chair, we're intending on issuing the notice, or at least letting them know of our intention to pursue designation and starting that conversation next week. My aim would be to bring this forward in October, but we will have to see how the conversations go with the property owners.
Very good, thank you. We look forward to that. And now we come to item 5, information item, heritage permit application tracking sheet. Are there any questions on this item for staff? Or staff, do you have questions or comments?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That completes the agenda. And so who would like to move adjournment? Councillor Michaud, thank you very much.
Chair,